Hi, my name is Eytan Stein, and I'm the chief of the leukemia service at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York City. I'm here to discuss with you some of the latest research findings for patients with IDH-mutated acute myeloid leukemia. As you all know, there are two different types of IDH mutations. There are mutations in IDH1 and mutations in IDH2. And combined, those mutations occur in approximately 20 to 25% of patients with newly diagnosed acute myeloid leukemia. Much of the recent research has come in the form of studies that are being done for patients with IDH1 mutations. A couple of years ago, the combination of the IDH1 inhibitor ivosidenib with azacitidine was approved as a standard of care for newly diagnosed older patients with AML with an IDH1 mutation based on the results of the AGILE trial, a randomized placebo-controlled phase 3 study where patients with newly diagnosed IDH1 mutant AML were randomized to receive ivosidenib with azacitidine or placebo with azacitidine. The median overall survival of the group of patients who received ivosidenib with azacitidine was over 22 months compared to a median overall survival of only 7.9 months in the group of patients who received azacitidine and placebo. And I do think that that really does establish ivosidenib as a drug that should be looked at very seriously in combination with azacitidine for newly diagnosed AML patients with an IDH1 mutation. In addition, in the last couple of years, there was a new IDH1 inhibitor that was approved for relapsed and refractory acute myeloid leukemia named olutasidenib. Olutasidenib is a very interesting compound, also because it targets the mutant IDH1 enzyme. But the results of the single-arm phase 2 study that led to its approval showed a very, very prolonged duration of remission in the patients who had received olutasidenib for relapsed and refractory disease. There are also studies that have been looking at triplet combinations for newly diagnosed AML, combining IDH1 inhibitors with the combination of azacitidine and venetoclax or another hypomethylating agent and venetoclax for newly diagnosed IDH1 mutant AML, trying to harness the power of venetoclax in addition to the power of a targeted therapy like ivosidenib or olutasidenib for patients with newly diagnosed IDH1 mutant disease. The last research update I want to tell you about is something that I'm very excited about, and that is thinking about treating and targeting IDH1 mutant myeloid malignancies in their precursor state. So what do I mean by that? I mean that there are patients with clonal hematopoiesis and clonal cytopenias of undetermined significance that have an IDH1 mutation. We know from some retrospective studies that those patients who have CCUS with an IDH1 mutation have a very high rate of progressing to myelodysplastic syndrome and acute myeloid leukemia. The risk of progression is actually elevated a great deal. There's a very interesting clinical trial being run out of Washington University aiming to target IDH1 mutant CCUS to see whether, number one, we can improve the blood counts of those patients who have cytopenias associated with their CCUS, but number two, and maybe in the broader scheme, whether there's the ability to prevent patients from going from a CH or CCUS into an overt myeloid malignancy. We're hoping to have some results of that study to talk about within the next 6 to 12 months. With that, I thank you very much for your time, and I hope you learned a little bit.